Okay. Okay, we'll see if we can do this double fit. Sometimes that's harder than it looks. I have to say, Carol's got a lot better memory than I do. You remind me that 20 years ago now, I think he came over and helped me in Stillwater County with the fair. So I'm glad he jogged my memory. I had somebody. I'll go through that a little bit here lately, but I'm out of the fair business now. I took another job, but I still live in Stillwater County. I did about 26 fairs in Stillwater County, almost 40 with other growing up and that sort of thing. So somebody recently came up to me and said, "Yeah, I was always going to come up to you at the fair and introduce myself, but every time I walked up to you, you had 10 people asking you questions." So that's kind of what we get during the fair. So I really appreciate the invite to come up here and talk to you a little bit. You guys have some really impressive things going on. So, and Bill, I'm sorry, it's the same presentation. So you did a good job staying awake on the first one. Hopefully you'll make it here. So anyway, so I just wanted to introduce myself briefly. I'm Lee Smelser. I live in Stillwater County in Columbus. I've been there about 30 years. Before that, previously in another life, I grew up on a family ranch and ranched for a while. I used extension at that time and collaborated on some statewide projects. I was also a conservation district supervisor and worked with that board quite a little bit, and several other things. You get drug into everything that you don't say no to. It took me a while to learn to not to say no, so you're always involved. Luckily, I didn't ever get involved with the school board. But anyway, so I've been an extension agent in 26 years, and about a year ago now, a year and a half, I transferred into another job that is kind of a morph between. I have a little bit of extension funding. I have some grant money through the Department of Ag Economics, which I'll hand out a survey here in a minute that at the end that we'd like you maybe to take. And then I also work for the Northern Plains Climate Hub, which is a USDA organization that was formed about 10 years ago. And their job is just to kind of do what Extension does and a lot of the other groups you work with, to provide information, synthesize it, develop it through ARS in a lot of cases, and then get it out to the people. So they were tickled to have the ability to put somebody in Montana. The rest of the crew is in Colorado and Wyoming. So my job is to wander around as much as I can. And I appreciate that. I've always lived in small counties. You guys, I'm really impressed with this building. I'll show you a picture a little later from my home county in Idaho. And they've done a lot of work on their building, but it's nothing like this. So I know the plywood walls have gone in the building and all of it, and the brands, I hope they're still there. They used to be around the top of the edge on the plywood. But anyway, the reason I got interested in this work and why I'm doing this really started in as being an extension agent in Stillwater County in the 2000s. Extension work kind of came to a standstill. You guys, I think you were similar to us from say 2000 or 96, 98 to 2006, something like that. It didn't rain. This map is a picture of the dirty 30s, and the lower one down there closer to us, or the one up there, 28 inches, 38 inches. That's a cumulative deficit from normal. So if you add up what you're supposed to get, average versus what you got, we're in that 11 years, we were 38 inches below normal. So we were 38 inches from normal. Well, I always like to say Stillwater County does it, the thing's big when they do it. We did it in 5 years. We were almost 2 water years behind. So not much was happening. Combines were running equipment wasn't running. We were kind of sitting around and looking at each other, well, what can we do? You know, so I asked them, one of my jobs was to get a draft committee together. And I said, well, we can sit here, we can gather information, that's what we're supposed to do, we can send it up to the state draft committee. But otherwise, we're gonna kind of sit here and complain to each other. What else do we need to do? And what they told me at the time was that we need to find a way to capture what's happening under the ground. And if you remember the drought designation process at that time, it was mostly hydrological, stream flow, storage reservoirs. We had weather stations, but where were they? They were in Columbus, they were at the airport, they were in towns, they were a few cooperator sites, but a lot of the stations were in the watershed area or maybe just a little bit removed, and we were missing 80% of the ground, the range in Montana. We didn't have a way to capture what's happening. So we actually started a group that got together. We had about 20 counties that were involved up through the center of the state, and we started at that time what was the first Mesonet in Montana. We were gathering soil, we had soil moisture probes in the ground, plus a full suite of weather. Those were funded by conservation districts, a grant that we had, and county commissioners and others. But luckily, as you'll hear in a moment, the Mesonet started. Yeah, and they, because what happened to that organization is we had a lot of individuals trying to get people, but we couldn't find any overarching agency to help us keep it going and maintain them and everything else. So it fell apart. But then we started and got a grant, and we put one on Bill's place and some others in Muscle Valley and Stillwater County that started some of the first. We had about the first 10 of the first 15 stations of the Mesonet that currently exists. So this was just a map that we put together to kind of come up with those numbers that we could share with the state drought committee. So I talked. Pardon?
What do you consider a normal 10, 15 years before that?
On this was, so normal was I think this numbers I used like the 30-year normal, depending on the station. I used the period of record on the stations that we did have in Stillwater County with these numbers. So the other numbers are what the National Climate Center has for those other numbers for the state. So, and if you remember, we, at least in Stillwater County, we got kicked out of a lot of disaster declarations because I remember 2001 or 2, we got 3 inches of rain in August. In about 20 minutes, it washed the county roads out. Didn't do a thing for agriculture because it was too hot after that. None of it went in the ground, but because our rainfall was above the average, we got very little help that year. So that was the other reason we started working on these things, was to try to, we went up to the state drought committee a lot and tried to present information of what was happening in the rest of the 80% of Montana. And the disaster designation was different at that time. Started with county commissioners, and it still does to some extent, but it moved up through the process to a secretarial disaster declaration. So I'll show you in a minute. Now we've changed, they've changed that. They're doing a lot better job, and they want as much information as they can get. And this Mesonet will really help with that. So what I'll talk about today is a little bit about drought planning. I'm going to kind of, from listening to all the projects that you guys are involved with and some of the range work you're doing and everything, I won't spend much time on that. I put that in this morning because I thought maybe there might be a few tips you can get out of it. We'll talk about the developing and tools that are available through the Mesonet, give you some examples of those, and I'll make before I forget, I'll make the opportunity for you, if you guys see something you're interested in. I'm going to give you a lot of tools in there, because I'll got Jennifer to help these 2 different slides, information package. One of them's drought information and tools. and the others are just handy weather and climate data sites. And I think everything that I've talked about are on these sites. If you guys play with these and you have questions about them or want to sit down with a computer in here and learn how to use them better, I can come up back up. You can set up something like that too. I'll make that before I forget to get it. So questions at any time, pretty informal. The handouts have nearly all the information in, and then Jennifer's going to have a set of the slides so you can get the links off of them, or I can send those electronically too. So talking about questions, when we all have questions when we're out on the ground, it might be, am I going to have enough pasture this year? There's a cloud up there. I hope it isn't hailing. I always forget what I'm talking about when I'm up here in front of you. So anyway, we all have questions. So hopefully I'll try to give you some tools that can help answer some of these questions that we go through today. So we're getting into the drought planning side of it. I thought this quote was pretty interesting. There's not a one size fit all. You're not going to drought proof your ranch when we get in. I'm sure most of you have stockpiles for 1 or 2 years. Your pasture, you can get through 1 year of really bad conditions. You start getting into the second year, you're going to have to start using some of the things that were supposed to be later in the year. You get into that third year and almost everybody's in trouble one way or another. So this particular rancher in southern Colorado, in 2002, and I'll show you some figures on where we were at that time. In 12 months, they had 3 inches of rain total. So they didn't grow anything either. So they couldn't drought proof it, even if they had all of these in place. But what we're really after is to try to protect and manage and make sure we don't harm our ongoing rangeland and the health we have. And this is in particular is talking about the take half, leave half, and how it affects the roots and different grazing. But what we're really after with all of this stuff is trying to make sure that what we have will work again next year and the year after. So real quickly, you probably all have some kind of a drought plan. Try to do it, try to do it in good years. So you have it in place before you start in and have to react. Kind of break the cycle, but think about how you can break the cycle of just reacting when stuff happens. And I'm sure as long as you guys have been here, you're already in that mode. But sometimes we need some reminders. Is why I put this in here. So it's easier. This isn't going to show up on the screen, but when we're up here, it's easier when we're in a wet year to think about those things and get some things in place so that when we're at risk or in emergencies, we don't have to. We're already stressed enough. We don't need to be thinking that. I don't know how to say that. We get in trouble sometimes when we think too much. Or at least I do. My wife tells me all the time. So anyway, right now, fourth quarter, down by 20. That isn't a good time for Carolina to be planning. They're going to have to react, and hopefully they know how to react, or they're going to lose. So, and think about, I'll try to give you some triggers that maybe can help you earlier in the year, or think through things with triggers that'll help you signal when it's time to take action. It might be we had the prognostication is that we had 80% of a normal grass by May 1 or June 1. We're going to have to do something. Whatever that is, things we'll have to manage a little bit different. Maybe it's plants that you expect to see at a certain date that aren't there, or they're already senesced, basically, or something like that. What are your forage amounts? Or if you're measuring them, what do they look like this year? Those kind of things. So help get those triggers and a way to manage it before it comes around. So now we'll talk about what you asked me up here to talk about is maybe some of the tools that are coming around through this Mesonet and that we're trying to develop with this. So again, they're again, what I look at them as are kind of a help for doing these triggers and helping you plan. So I mentioned this already, but if you aren't familiar with it, let's see, you guys have about 5 stations here in Petroleum County that are part of the new Mesonet. So they are putting out data, and they're working on building it out to 205 stations, new stations in Montana. So we got a lot of funding to really help it. So they have temperature, relative humidity, wind speed at a 10-meter research grade tower, radiation, precipitation, year-round snow depth, soil moisture, and all of them, nearly all of the newer ones will have a camera on it, so you can see what your neighbor's grass is doing if you want. So they also did, so they have soil moisture and temperature sensors at 2, 4, 8, 20, and 40 inches, unless you get bedrock like Sweetgrass County. So we only got to 36 inches down there in a couple of spots. And they also took soil samples from each of those, and they're analyzing all that soil slowly but surely. That's one of my pet peeves, but they're getting it done. So they'll be able to do some things I'll talk about here in a minute. Because right now it's just volumetric water content that they're measuring. There's some things we need to do to get it more, so we can look at station to station comparing those. This is kind of the map. I do have a couple of copies of this that I can leave if anybody, or a similar map on where we're at. The greens is operational. The orange they're installing this year. The gray they're installing next year. The red cells are where they need to identify, and the kind of pink, I don't know what color that is, but the other gray is the build-in process, I guess. So yeah, there we go. They come out different looking on the screens too. So all of these, so at least from my perspective, they can be used a lot of different ways. But the reason I'm interested in and what I want to see is the ag and rangeland tools that can be developed for this. So that'll be based off of soil moisture. There's some crops things that we can do. I'll talk about a little bit. This is a real big one, the drought monitoring and getting a handle on those numbers, and then maybe some stuff that'll help us determine forage production and help us understand that a little better earlier in the year. Some things like that. So and you guys have been doing this a long time, so I know you have a pretty good handle on things. You kind of know what's happening on your ranch. But the way I look at these tools is kind of like this. It's really pretty scene. We've got a nice bunch of sheep grazing on the hillside. Everything looks really good. Sometimes things sneak up on us and we kind of get surprised. So the way I look at these tools, hopefully we can keep something like that from happening out there by having information earlier in the year. So they're kind of broken down. The way I broke it down for this is there's kind of some tools that look at the past. There's some that look at what's currently happening. And then there's a couple that are trying to look into the future. And I know that's dangerous. I did a similar tour in January and across 15 counties in eastern Montana. And at the end, I was talking with some ranchers in Ecolacta, and one of them they'd asked me I did a little more forecasting on that, or I didn't do it, but I had information from the climatologists that were forecasting stuff. And one of the ranchers said, you need to tell them what your granddad says about forecasting weather. And so what he said was, in order to forecast weather, you either have to be over 90 or a damn fool. So I try not to fall into that second category with this, but I think there's some tools that might help us. So we'll go through some things that might help you in the past, and hopefully I'm sure all of you have some kind of records of your range production. If you don't, or you want to compare it, um, and get a baseline or understand it a little more, the NRCS has what's called a range land analysis program. And there's some pretty interesting information on there. This chart is what the year and the amount of forage that was produced that year that they measured, and then what the percent was of normal versus those years. So, and you can highlight, it's hard to do this without a pointer here, but you can highlight an area you want to ranch, pasture, or whatever, and get that information on there. It also is a good thing to look at because NRCS is probably using some of this information so you know where they're coming from. And others are probably using this too. So, and then you can get at the bottom there, you can look at historical production, so you can look at the 2000 years and how it compares to this year, or those kind of things to help you look back and say, well, 2015 was a year similar to this. What did we produce? Things are looking pretty close to that. So that's a look in the past. It'll pull up what's happening this year also for whatever area that you outline. It'll give you long-term averages, and it'll give you an idea of what's happening out there. Again, a tool. It may not be 100%, but it's based off a lot of soil type, production records, all those kind of things. So it'll give you another way. So a lot of what we have is looking at what's happening for current conditions and what's kind of mostly being developed right now. So I mentioned that, but one of the most important things I think, or one of the important things that's what we were after when we were talking in 2000 was to get a better handle on these drought designations. So nearly all of our disaster payments now, there's some exceptions, but nearly all of them are based off of this map. Here's the drought. So the U.S. drought. So when we get, when we get aid, or it first triggers off of those maps. So it's important that those lines are drawn correct. And there's a group in Montana that sits down every Monday, and one person is in charge of drawing these out, and it's shared across several agencies. The authors, about 6 people that offer the drought monitor. They look at all of the information from these Mesonet stations and other stations that's pulled into it. They look at that, and then on your handy weather sites is another place that you can I forget what they call it, but it's a way or place for you to put information in. So if you're seeing things that don't agree with this, the drought, well, should have looked at it before it came up. Like I said on that first slide, I didn't forget what I'm talking about. So anyway, it's a part of the drought monitor. You can get to it several places, but they want information from you guys and what you're seeing in the county. Pictures, anecdotes, historic records, whatever you can get. They look at that every week when they put those together. So if they're having the trouble of trying to include Petroleum County in the yellow, they can use that information as well as the information they have from these sites and others to make those decisions. One of the other things that you can do, this is from drought.gov. I highlighted Stillwater County. I used Stillwater County because I could go to the map and easily find places. When I tried to find some of the weather stations out here, I don't know the roads, and so I was spending too much time. So I just finally gave up and said, okay, I'm going to use this. I know where it's at, and I can use it, but it transfers to you guys too. So anyway, they've made really big progress at the Drought Water Supply Committee on getting this right. They know they're not perfect, but they really have, and they want to get it. So that there was not that they weren't trying, not to step on any toes, but there wasn't, it wasn't a good process in 2000. That's my pet peeve. It's much, much better now and it works pretty well, I think. I don't know if you guys agree, but if you don't, put in that drought recorder information and tell them about it, because they want it. You can drill down on drought.gov and get information on where we're sitting and when each of these is published. So it'll show you population numbers, where you rank as far as history for publications, that sort of thing. If you're doing a newsletter or something like that, to just kind of pull information on what's happening. So again, this is one of the main reasons that I think these are really important. And what I want you to watch on this map, this is U.S. Drought Monitor in its current form, started in 2000. So this is an animated deal that'll go from 2000 to today, or last week, I guess. And what one of our state climatologists is telling us is maybe even more in our area than La Nina and El Nino effects on our weather is kind of watch how drought starts down in here in the Gulf or right over in here and moves up through the country and ends up in Montana about 3 years later. That's kind of what they're thinking, at least might be a better indication, not that it doesn't affect us, but that's what they're telling me recently. So I'll let this run. And it starts in 2000. You can see this right up through the center of Montana, including you guys, and from us when all that nasty red stuff was happening when we first started talking about this and getting a group together. So this is 2001. Probably don't want to bring up those memories, but 2002. Black in there. Went down a little bit, but kind of just stayed all the way through January. Now we're into 2003. Still around 2004. 2005. Still here. We start to ease out a little bit. Cleared off some of it, 2006. Oops. And it is pretty much, I forgot, I'm gonna put that in this sometime, but it is true that Montana is either coming in or going out. So, yeah, well, I said, you don't want to look at this too critically or bring up too many memories. So, but there are a few good years coming. 2008.
We did have that war,
Yeah. I think it's about 18 out of the 20. Well, for 2000 up through, it's been about 18 to 20 years that we were pretty. A lot of us were in drought. Oh, look at that! It's like 2011. Oh, and by the way, 2011, you guys did it too. The reason we got the funding for most of these stations is all of your water ended up in South Dakota on the Air Force Base down there. And it seems they get pretty excited and can't take their jets up. So they came up with congressional funding to try to get a better handle on what's happening up here so they don't get surprised again. So 2013, pretty good. We started in, I think it's, 15, where we had that fly drought, they called it, that kind of caught everybody off guard. 15 started building in. 16 should have speeded this up. Now, particularly from about, I think it's about 18, if you watch that move up through from Montana or from the Gulf, it moved right up into us just a few years later into 20 and 21. So we're at 18 there and it's moving up through the country. 19, we're in pretty good shape, but then we hit 2020. 21. I hope you had hay and didn't have to haul it too far. And 22. Unfortunately, some of those black spots are probably grasshoppers. 23. And up through, we were looking pretty good earlier in 24. Starting to go the wrong way now. So I thought it was interesting to see it, how it's played out over the last few years. So back to tools, there's two major sites right now. The Montana Mesonet has, and the Montana Drought Dashboard, which is on your handout sheets, have most all these tools. There's also the overarching upper Missouri River Basin, so North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, have a group that's putting some information like this particular sheet, and they're in the process of developing more tools. Is a 12-week difference from what it was 12 weeks ago to now. So we've lost considerable volumetric water. That's no surprise, but again, it gives you more information to figure out what's happening across the country. This one I've been after them since they started to get this up, and we're getting pretty close. But plant available water is what I mentioned. Right now, it's volumetric water is the way they measure it. So how much water is in the soil. It doesn't take into soil type into account, but they have all that information in there, getting it processed and put in. So that way you can, this graph's a little hard to see, but we all probably remember our soils classes. The soil holds on to a certain amount of water that isn't available to plants, and it depends on the soil type. You guys are going to be different than we are in Stillwater County or down along the river. Clay holds it a lot more tighter than sand. So this will help us be able to compare stations across the state to each other, instead of right now it's just your soil and you can compare it year to year, but you can't really compare it to Big Sandy or Columbus. So, and then also it'll help us to develop these graphs to know where we are realistically on what's available to the plants, which will also help us. Evapotranspiration is another real big thing. A lot of our water goes up into the air, particularly this 3 weeks of 90, 100 plus stuff. So again, you can see in 2024, we're up there on how much we were evaporating. We got by pretty well good last year because we kept getting rain and it was a little cooler. It gives you more information to help understand what's happening. Another one is a lot of our insect pests have growing degree day models that'll help them understand when to spray alfalfa weed, those sort of things. So we'll have more local data to develop some of these growing degree models. Our plant pathologist at MSU is looking at a model for Lead Street mosaic to understand when we need to start looking for those or scouting for those kind of things, so we can determine whether we need to spray or not. Soil moisture, I mentioned, is another big part. Again, this is on the hill overlooking Cooney Reservoir is where these data were taken. So there's a couple different maps. There's doing the same thing, but the colored are different levels, and you can see how they move in. You can see we had a big rain event here, so everything spiked up. You can look at comparisons from what it looked like in 19 versus what it looks like in 23 and what it started to look like in 24. This is a characterization of on this chart, you can pick different depths like topsoil at 4 inches, or the column at 8 to 20 inches, or the subsoil, and map out that on what's happened. The black line is current, and these are different years down here. So again, it'll help you understand a little better what's happening out on the ground. Roundup, I pulled one of the stations and pulled the same information. We're down there pretty low as far as their soil moisture on that particular station. And you can look at different years as we get more and more of this data to understand how this looked like 2020, 2028 when you're looking from 2040. Some of it, maybe not me, but anyway, This map is on the UMRD, so that's the Upper Missouri River Basin. This is the Montana Mesonet site, and it's also the state drought board. And most of what they can get nearly all of the information they're looking at, the different parameters off of this site when they're making that weekly drought determination. So in this instance, these are weather stations that are the dots. The black are anomalies. They need to look at it, but it's because it's getting real dry quickly. It's why those are up there right now. It's also overlaid with a gridded product that tries to capture what the soil moisture is, and you can also overlay the drought monitor over this to see if it matches up with the lines that they have on there. Again, it helps us with understanding what our conditions are a little better if we're not out digging post holes, those kind of things, so we can understand better. There's a bunch more, since it's getting late, I won't spend too much more time, but there's a lot of tools that are available on that side. So the other piece that may be valuable, I looked at it a little bit this year too, is Fort Keogh did research 10-15 years ago. And so our grass growth in the Great Plains area equals what your April, May, June total precip compared to the median. It works better on median than mean, sorry, not median. Mean works a little better than average. So if you take that percent of normal, whatever you're getting this year as far as April, May, June precip, NRCS adds in December and October, I think. So from the previous year, that'll equal your grass. So yeah, it's a little late the end of June to know you can see what you got. But if you do that 1st of April, you do that 1st of May and the 1st of June, and when we're working on getting that tied into the soil moisture information, so we can say at the 1st of April, well, we're already only 50% of normal of what soil moisture should be. You're going to have to get whatever number. You guys are all familiar with the swag system. It's a scientific wild ass guess. So I'm using the swag system here, but if we're 50% of normal, we're going to have to get 150% rain over those next 3 weeks. So would you rather gamble on your farm or go to Vegas? Whichever you want to do there, as far as whether you're going to have grass or not. So it'll give you tools earlier in the year when we can get the soil moisture pulled in, and it does help to look at those. So some of the places you can get this information. This is I did this again. This was at CUNY. This is a precipitation accumulates for the state of Montana, the whole state. The 1st of April on the top chart, you can see the black line stops there. The 1st of April, we were down into the lower percentile there for the whole state. The 1st of June or 1st of May was the second graph, and some projections on the top, depending on what we think we'll either get 50% of the period of record or 90%, et cetera, those different colored lines. The bottom one is again the last week. So again, for the rest of the growing season, gives you some projections. But this year you can see we hugged that bottom percent all the way through. I think, at least in our country, we came out pretty fair in grass. We luckily don't have quite as many grasshoppers as you guys do, but from what I've heard just talking earlier, you guys are fair on grass production if it wasn't for the other little pests. So anyway, another place you can look is that again, these guys are either over 90 or fools, but the monthly precipitation outlook as they look forward. There's a lot of people that spend a lot of time trying to figure out these kind of maps. This is a little more information on the April, May, June thing. It gives you historical record on the bottom and a trend line. This is for Stillwater County. You can pull off the site, so it gives you what historical precipitation was for April. Again, this is based off of cooperative stations and others, so it's gonna be different for different areas. If you have historical ranch records, you can use those. But here's some places you can get those April, May, June figures. Then if you look at what your April present, in our case, in Stillwater County, in April, we had 2.2 inches was our average. We got 2.1. May was 3.5. We got 5 in a couple of spots. June was 2.7 and we got 1.4. June was bad this year. So again, you can pull those numbers and do a percentage calculation. It didn't work very well because we might have been close to 90, but I'm not sure we produced 90% if you look at a straight average there, but more information. So yeah, look at this. Muscle Shell County, similar, a little bit different precip distributions, but came out a little bit worse, but it gives you an idea on what's happening for an area. The other drought, if you want to get, or the other tool, if you want to get a little more, what they use a lot when they're looking at these each week in the drought and water supply committee is what's called SPI and SPEI. So SPI is the standardized precipitation index. So it tries to even make sure it gets good data, and it tries to even it out if something's weird, and it also pulls different places. So you can tell I don't know all the science behind that index, but it tries to make it tries to eliminate those odd 4 inches of rain that didn't do any good either. Then the standardized precipitation evaporation index, it takes into account the ET that's happened. So again, they're gridded products that they overlay the drought map and make sure that it's fitting where it should be. Gives them more information to help draw those numbers and to help you. Another pretty cool tool is called OWLS. You can toggle on and off these. So this is all of the weather and water land stations that are available and putting out information. So everything from CocoRa's, which is if you haven't heard of it, it's a collaborative rain hail citizen science where you can get a rain gauge, you can keep track of it. It's put up on a website, and it gives you more data across a bigger landscape. The co-op sites that have been around forever, RAWs, again, those are mostly down in the mountain areas. Scans, NRCS's program, snowtail sites, you can turn these on or off, and then the state and local ones such as the Mesonet and those kind of things. This gives you where they're at and gives you an idea of what they're doing. What I don't like about this is you have to go somewhere else and you can't just click on these dots and get the information from it. But it gives you an idea of what's around you. So the future. So one thing that NRCS has, if you haven't heard about it, that again, trying to look into the future, tries to make they don't say swag, but an educated estimate of how many pounds per acre might in total grow during the growing season. It starts the 1st of April. I will say it's more accurate in Wyoming, Colorado than it has been up here. And I think the further east you go in Montana, it's accurate, and they're working on some things to try to improve that too. It'll give you maps that look like this. The one on the left is April 1. It gives you, I'll show you in a second, but it gives you below normal expectations. If you think you're going to get below normal, gives you average rainfall expectations, and then above normal. And so these are both below normal expectations, April 1, and then where we were at, I think it's August 6th. So it was a little more dire because of what our soil moisture looked like earlier in the year. It takes into account a lot of different parameters, but soil moisture and other things to give you a tool earlier in the year. You can, I just selected this dot up there in the corner because in the early March and April, it was hanging in there in the drought category up there. And so I pulled this quadrant and it pulled, at that time it said the below normal would be about 11% if we got below normal of the 38-year rolling average. which is what this uses 38 years of an average to come up with these numbers. You can also, so again, there's the blue is above, yellow is near normal, orange is below normal. It gives you an estimate based off of all the parameters we talked about on what the grass growth might be. You can also then, this again was just the April 16th deal. So if you got a lot of moisture, you believe blue, what it looked like near normal. Then you can also, okay, come on, look here. So you can zoom in, and so it's interactive. You can put a grid on your particular place, and it'll tell you again. This was the April for the site up there in the corner up there, up around Caver up in there. But at that time, normal they might have made 28% warm for the growing season is what this was. So. So from April 1 through it stops the end of September is what it does, but so it includes all those. Whoops. So again, something else that might help you if you're looking. This site has a lot of really good information on it. This is a broader site, but it has some drought information tools, so I stuck this in here. This next slide I just put in because I really didn't. Megan Van Eman, I don't know if she's been up here yet, but she's our beef specialist for MSU. She always says she has to have a Debbie Downer slide in here. So this is my Debbie Downer. This is my home country, where I grew up, ranch for quite a few years. This last week, I just thought it was worth a reminder because where it burnt about 175,000 acres. We had a fire in 2000, oh no, it must have been 1985 or 6 that burned 250,000 in the same acres. But we're on one side of a butte, and I never thought it would burn as much as it did. It burnt clear through, clear to the highway, along the sweet old highway. And we put out a lot of fires and kept them up in the high country or parts of ranches that burnt. You know, burn 100% of all of our old ranch except for the outbuildings and maybe the hayfields. I haven't bugged them yet to ask what it all did. But I guess the reason I put this in there, not that you need something else to worry about, but I know and we were the same way. We wanted some of these fires to burn sometimes, but they can get away from it, I guess, is the moral of the story. So, and there was a lot of help that came, and there, you know, there was locals that were on it, and then, you know, we transferred to the BLM, in our case over there, and they helped a lot, and they brought in a team from Nevada. But I guess the reason I put in this is because it was close to home, at home, and it, we all know wildfire can get us in trouble, but it really shocked me that it could go as far as it did. Kind of like our Denton fire and some of those other things that happened up here. So I'm over with the Debbie Downer. If you have any ideas, so the Mesonet is housed, I don't know how many cats we have here, but the Mesonet is housed on the campus, and it's in UM campus. So they're all right, but you know, but they're doing a really good job with this, but they know they need ag expertise to make the tools. So they want information from you guys and other people that are going to use this on what tools that you'd like to see come from this. There's the whole country is kind of reeling, trying to figure out what all we're going to use it. So MSU is working with them. Some of the specialists are working with them, but they want feedback from you guys. So get a hold of me or send it to Jennifer, and she can get it to me. They do want. Just real quickly, and I think I've only got a couple more slides. Some of the ways that I use this as an extension agent, and it's being used, the data from 2000 and on. This is a little outdated. The first one on the left, we drove up every month, or when I think they had them once a month or more than that, when in the heat of the drought in the early 2000s to bring this data to the state drought committee. It's more automated now, so that part we don't need to do, but I'm glad the data is there. We also were able to get in We were able to get CRP released a little bit early, because we had some data that showed what was happening on the ground. In 2015, I believe it was, we had, in our country, we got in mid-May, maybe a tad later, alfalfa was about that tall and it froze, turned yellow, wasn't gonna grow. So, and most crop insurances, they've changed a little bit, but they wouldn't adjust it till the end of the growing season. But because we had data that showed that we had frost and right close there, we were able to get a regional letter written that released that earlier before. In that case, if they would have had to leave it, the grasshoppers and the elk took it. So again, some of the real practical uses that this is, and then every fall, NRCS and the county committee gets the rangeland, I think they call them experts together in the county, and we set the NAP, the grazing loss for the year. So the more data we have here, the easier it is for me. When I went in as an agent, I was the one who said, well, we had a 90% loss, but they sometimes frowned on that. And so I can justify moving that above that 50% loss level sometimes because we have more data. One of the last things is, I did hand out a survey. This is what's actually the project that's, it's a multi-state projects that's looking at climate and insurance products, the ones you're using, the ones you're not using, what you like about them, what you don't like about them, and then also trying to develop extension material to try to get that information out to you in a better format that's more useful to you. So that's what the survey is about. It's through a multi-year grant that's across several states and MSU and some other universities and that are part of that. So that's what that is. If you have time to fill that out, you can give it to me tonight or Jennifer will collect them later. So lastly, hopefully, we gave you some tools that that maybe you can use, and you'll have maybe other thoughts. They're not positive yet, but other thoughts instead of the ones we're at the first, and we'll give you some ideas on the way that you can approach some of these droughts. And lastly, I think I got 3 of them. Hopefully my presentation was clearer than if you pull up to this stoplight. And hopefully you can understand it better than the ownership of this book. So with that, is there any questions on what I went over really quickly? I know one of my favorite Far Side cartoons is a little kid sitting in his desk with his hand up and saying, "Teacher, can I be excused? My brain's full." So I'm sure your brains are full. If you have questions later, get hold of Jennifer or me. So, or if you have questions now.
Something that I've wondered about recently, we always worry about drought, but is there anything to show the over?
When it's over?
Yeah, when we're gonna be over, you know, and then we can let the horses run.
I think that comes into I'm not over 90. Most people are working this on, no, that's that. But so they work really, I guess my best answer off of my cuff is to watch the drought monitor, because there's there's 5 people in a chain of about 40 emails that goes around the state each week trying to do that, trying to say, are we over yet? Or, well, we don't want to pull back yet because the long range is still really dry. Those SPI numbers. So they work at that every week. And they're trying, they aren't trying to be, they have a really good attitude from my observations. And I'm on the list. I can chime in if I want to. I don't very often unless I see something, but or send some pictures, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of people that look at this stuff all the time. That are trying to make sure we're in the right. We have the lines drawn right. It's in the right designation, D1 to D4 or 5. And when can we start pulling this back based off of all the data that we have. So that's not a great answer, but I think that's probably where everything comes together. And I think we'll get more and more of that as we work through some of those things with Mesonet and try to get more tools out there. I will say it'll be easier when we get, I didn't say that, but because of that, we had started putting stations out, but that big batch of funding, we're gonna put 205 in the Upper Missouri River Basin, stopping it to divide in Montana, 205 stations every 10 kilometers. So as we get more and more of that data, I think with soil moisture, evapotranspiration, everything else that we're gonna get out of that, it'll be easier to answer that question. So. There's a lot of different philosophies. I have one I probably shouldn't share with them. Any other questions? Again, holler if you need information or help or don't understand some of the tools that are on that. We can get you help one or another. Thank you. Bill was waiting for most of it.